I grew up in Hyesan, a city of 200,000 on the Yalu River, which runs between China and North Korea. It is the coldest part of North Korea, with temperatures plunging to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. My mother and father encouraged me from the start to be proud of who I am. My father sometimes held me in his lap and read me children's books. The only ones available were published by the government and had political themes. Instead of fairy tales, they were stories set in a place called South Korea, where homeless children went barefoot and begged in the streets. It never occurred to me that they were really describing life in my country. We also read about our leaders and how they worked so hard and sacrificed so much for us. Our dear leader Kim Jong-il had mystical powers. His biography said he could control the weather with his thoughts, and that he wrote 1,500 books during his 3 years at Kim Il-sung University, named after his father. This worship of the Kims was reinforced in documentaries, movies, and TV shows broadcast by the single, state-run station. Whenever the leaders' pictures appeared on the screen, stirring sentimental music would play. It made me so emotional. North Koreans are raised to venerate our fathers and our elders. And in our collective minds, Kim Il-sung was our beloved grandfather, and Kim Jong-il was our father. There were so many things we were forbidden to do, buy, or sell. And public executions were used to teach lessons in loyalty and the consequences of disobedience. When I was little, a young man was arrested for killing and eating a cow. Cows were the property of the state, and they were too valuable to eat because they were used for plowing fields and dragging carts. Anybody who butchered one would be stealing government property. In March 2007, me and my mother pay a smuggler to take us across the Yalu River and into China. Our group was crossing the border into Mongolia at night on foot during the winter, when temperatures could drop to -27 degrees Fahrenheit. Winter crossings were supposed to be safer because Chinese border patrols were lighter as a result of the frigid weather. There was a real possibility we could be arrested, and my mother and I had decided we would not be taken. It took 4 long days, by train and bus, for our group of defectors to reach the desert. We were accompanied by a Han Chinese man who worked for the mission. "If any of you gets captured, please don't give up the rest of the team," he said. "Tell the police you were traveling alone and save the rest of them." He took us to a tiny town in the middle of the Gobi. A woman at the mission had given us 2 flashlights and 2 compasses, and the guide showed the only man in our group how to use them. We were to go northwest from the drop site, then pass through 5 barbed wire fences before arriving at the tall border fence. We should identify ourselves as North Korean refugees to the first person we met and turn ourselves in to be rescued. After the sunset, a taxi took us to a spot a few miles outside town. Our Chinese guide gave us last-minute instructions. "If you look out in the desert, the bright lights are coming from a town on the Mongolian side," he said. "Head toward them. The lights from the town on the Chinese side are much dimmer. Stay away from them." He pointed to the brightest star in the sky. "If you get separated from the group or can't use your compass, just look up and find the star. That will be north." Then he left us. After we walked a few steps, my mother and I looked back and saw that he was on his knees on the frozen ground, praying. I wondered, why does this person, who doesn't speak our language, care so much that he is willing to risk his life for us? I said a silent prayer of thanks as we became a part of the night. There was no cover, just miles of featureless sand and stone dotted with dried grass. The cold was like a living thing. It clawed at my skin and grabbed at my legs to slow them. I leaned against my mother for warmth, and she gave me her coat when I couldn't stop shivering. Her shoes were too thin, and she kept stumbling. The male defector gave her an extra pair of running shoes. They were too big, but she tied the laces tight to keep them on her feet. I doubt she would have made it without his help. It was the longest night of my life. Every time we thought we heard a noise or saw a headlight in the distance, we panicked. After we wriggled under the 4th barbed wire fence, We heard the sound of engines and saw a huge searchlight sweeping over the desert. We threw ourselves to the ground and prayed until the sounds and light faded away. We were afraid to turn on the flashlight and look at the compass. So we used the stars to guide us. But then clouds covered them. For a while. We probably walked in circles until we decided to huddle around the man to block the light while he read the compass. I finally allowed myself to think bad thoughts because even if he could read my mind, I was going to die anyway. Still, betraying the dear leader was probably the hardest thing I had ever done. It felt like his hand was following me, trying to pull me back. My mother later told me she was thinking the same thing. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse. A pack of wild animals surrounded us. I heard them panting. And I could see the glow of their eyes. I completely lost my mind. Help us. Is anybody out there? Anybody? I screamed. But there was no one at all. I was ready to lie down and die. Suddenly we heard a train. It sounded close. But it seemed to come from two different places. Most of our group ran one way. But my mother and I thought the sound had come from somewhere else. So we ran in another direction. Minutes later, the border fence took shape in the half-light. I thought it was a mirage until we saw holes in the wire and bits of cloth snagged where others had crossed. As we scrambled through, the barbs ripped at my coat as if they were trying to rape me back into China.